No compromise is what Republican Congressman Mike Pence is promising if the GOP takes back Congress in November. Now, does he mean no compromise on anything? Well, we'll ask, because Congressman Pence joins us live. He's the House Republican Conference Chairman. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greta.
No compromise?
Well, look, there were media reports earlier this week that suggested that Republicans were going to learn from the mistakes of 1995 and we're going to look for more compromise. Look, I want to be very, very clear with people around the country. There's going to be no compromise on ending the era of runaway federal spending, borrowing, bailouts, takeovers, deficits, and debt. There's no compromise on repealing Obamacare lock, stock, and barrel. There's going to be no compromise on supporting our troops or protecting the values of the American people in the way we spend people's money. So, let's be clear on this. The American people, the millions of Americans that are rising up in this election, are speaking with one voice and saying enough is enough, and they're sending the men and women across this country into these competitive congressional races, and I hope down the street to Congress in just a couple of weeks, because they want to change the course of this government. And there's going to be no compromise on changing the course back to fiscal responsibility, limited government reform.
How do we get bipartisanship in our government if right out the gate, assuming you take the majority in the House, and we still got to wait 10 days to see what that happens, but how do we have bipartisanship if right out of the gate you say no compromise?
Well, look,
because that's important. You agree that bipartisanship is important?
Yeah, but the way they define bipartisanship, in my experience, since the Pelosi Congress took over, was they give Republicans a chance to vote on Democrat bills. I mean, real bipartisanship.
Is that what you would do on the flip side, then?
Well, no, look, real bipartisanship is looking for what is authentically common ground. We can find common ground on support for our military. We can find common ground, I believe, on reforming the way Congress does business. We can find common ground in extending all the current tax relief for 2 years, as been proposed by people on the left and the right. But common ground is not compromise. I mean, if people are looking in and they think that men and women like Todd Young and Jackie Walorski, who are running great campaigns in Indiana, or people like Dennis Ross and Daniel Webster down in Florida, who I was with earlier today and yesterday, are coming to Washington, D.C. to meet liberals in Washington, D.C. halfway, they've got another thing coming. These people are coming to Washington, D.C. to change the way we do business, to change the direction of our national government back toward fiscal discipline, limited government, and reform.
All right. And we should say, though, that the fiscal discipline, that your party itself has had problems in the past. Do you agree, the Republican Party, in terms of having discipline? Yeah,
Greta, I think I agree strongly. I said after 2006 that Republicans didn't just lose our majority, we lost our way. I mean, our party walked away from the principles that minted our national governing majority, first in 1980 and again in 1994, and the American people walked away from us. I mean, the very suggestion, as I read some in the media promoting that the mistakes of the past Republican Congress were that they didn't compromise enough. Good heavens, the Republican Congress failed because there was too much compromise, there was too much spending, deficits, debt, borrowing, even bailouts, and the American people are saying, we want this new generation coming to Washington, D.C. to partner with the principled men and women in the Republican and minority in Congress today and put our fiscal house in order.
All right, we tend to grab sound bites. So, of course, we hear that Congressman Mike Pence says no compromise. Everyone thinks, right away, no compromise. Just so that I understand what you mean by take the health care. I know the Republicans want to repeal it, and I assume that that's a done deal. If you get the majority, you're going to fight to repeal it. If you do repeal it, does it mean that you're unwilling to compromise, to discuss and create a new any health care improvements? Are you willing to talk to the opposing party?
Well, I think that's a very good question. When I said no compromise yesterday down in Tampa, Florida, I said there's going to be no compromise on our commitment to repeal Obamacare lock, stock, and barrel. But Republicans are also committed to starting over with health care reform that will focus on lowering the cost of health insurance without growing the size of government. I mean, you got Democrat Ron Wyden who had a proposal to allow people to purchase health insurance across state lines. Republicans support that idea in principle. Again, that's common ground. That's not compromise. We'll look for opportunities to pass medical malpractice reform to lower the cost and end junk lawsuits. So yes,
I guess we should be cautious then in saying that you're not that you just it's not going to be like now we got the power, so tough luck to the other side. It's not going to be that way.
Well, no. Look, we've had several years of now the we won, you lost. Here's the way it's going to be approach to governance. What Republicans are going to do is we're going to keep our word with the American people. We're going to take a stand to restore fiscal responsibility to Washington, D.C. We're going to get this economy moving again by standing up against more bailouts and more borrowing, by defending the current tax relief, promoting additional tax relief. We're going to stand on principle and not compromise on principle.
Why should we believe you? Because there have been Republican Congresses that have said the same thing, and it hasn't happened. So, I mean, always as we approach the elections, we hear, great passion on both sides and great promises, and then of course we hear the nasty ads too. But I mean, why should we believe you this time? Well,
look, I think I know that in recent years finding backbone in the Republican Party was like finding water in the moon. So we get that. I understand that people were disappointed in Republican governance in the recent past. But what I always point to when I'm out traveling around the country and around Indiana is when every single House Republican voted against that phony stimulus bill, every single House Republican voted against their budget, against their government takeover of health care. I think the American people have started to figure out that Republicans in Congress have learned our lesson, and you combine them with this extraordinary generation of men and women that are rising up in House and Senate races around the country. And I think they recognize that this is a new movement on Capitol Hill, and it's a movement that's going to say we're not going to compromise with political elites, with the establishment in Washington, D.C. that want to grow government and expand the role of government in our lives.
So what are you going to do about earmarks? Are earmarks out in your mind? Because that's a sneaky way to expand government. That's a sneaky way to spend money. Are you willing to say, no earmarks?
Look, I think there's no question. House Republican leadership is united that we are committed to continuing our moratorium on earmarks. This year, Republicans
moratorium or get rid of them.
Republicans embraced a moratorium on earmarks this year in Congress.
I mean, I don't even know. I mean, actually, as a fundamental matter, some earmarks are good. Some earmarks are important, and but they're like fighting words as well. But I mean, a moratorium seems to me is sort of not the courage to say we're going to get rid of them totally.
Well, look, I think what we have to do is we have to extend the moratorium for the next Congress, and then we have to engage in a conversation with the American people about the nature of federal spending as a whole. I mean, we're going to look at this budget in totality, and we're going to look at domestic spending, defense spending, entitlement spending, and we're going to make the tough choices to put our fiscal house in order. But we're also going to look at the way Congress spends money in small ways, and call them earmarks or call them plus-ups. It's absolutely imperative that we end the practice of earmarking as it exists in the Congress today. But it all begins by saying we've got to push it away. We've got to focus on putting our fiscal house in order and categorically rejecting this pathway of more borrowing, more spending, more bailouts, more stimulus that frankly the government's been on now for a number of years.
I would even like to go back to the point where our standards are that $1 million still is a lot of money. I mean, we deal in billions and trillions, and now even like when you hear millions cents someplace, it's like that's a lot of money. But we need to look to see where everything is.
Well, we have an opportunity with the Internet today. We have an opportunity for an unprecedented degree of transparency and accountability, where the American people are going to see how their elected representatives are spending their money. We've got to do that. But first and foremost, the American people should know, going into this election now, less than 2 weeks from today, is that Republicans are committed to stand on the principles of fiscal responsibility, limited government, free market economics, and on those principles, there'll be no compromise.
Congressman, thank you. And of course, we're going to be watching to see what happens a week from Tuesday to see whether Republicans take over, Democrats retain the ownership of the House of Representatives. Nice to see you, sir.
You too.